Scott Frith, chairman of Happinest Brands. Welcome to Franchise Findings.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, you've been in franchising for a very long time, since your childhood, and you and your father have been an integral part of a brand that started back in 1967. Can you tell me a little bit about your trajectory in small
Yeah,
business, as
yeah, for
well as
sure.
what's become a big business with this franchise?
Yeah. So, I tell this story a good bit. My father, we're from the city, from Philadelphia. He moved out to the suburbs. He was the first one in his family to ever own a home. And he had a home with a lawn, had no idea, being a city guy, how to take care of it. And lawn doctor came through the neighborhood one day, hanging door hangers, hires lawn doctor, that franchisee, and he become pretty good friends. My father was looking for a job in franchising, and he was interviewed and hired by the founder, Tony Giordano, in 1978. So my dad comes home. I always say I remember the day that he came home and said, I got this new job. I was 6 years old. He clears out our laundry room and he sets up his office with a desk that we got at a local school, starts selling franchises. And that was my first exposure. Of course, I had no idea
And
what
no
the
one was
business
working
model
from home
was or
back then.
exactly. That was kind of a new thing, right? And so it was a trial period with the company before he moved the family. That lasted a very short period of time. Tony said, "You're my guy. Come in. Let's build this business together." And so my father very quickly found out that Tony had hired my father to be his successor. And so he kind of moved him around the company, kind of got him exposed to different things. Unfortunately, at a point, Tony passed away of a heart attack, which he knew he had a heart condition. And that's when my father stepped into the role, kind of built the business from when he joined, it was literally on the verge of bankruptcy. And when he exited after about 35 years, it was the number one franchise in its category and one of the most respected brands in franchising. So,
What led it to be on the verge of bankruptcy?
to be honest, the two founders, Tony and Bob, they were just very entrepreneurial. And when you're starting a business, maybe taking more out of it earlier than really you should, and not really putting the infrastructure in place to scale up a big business over time. And so there was a moment where it's like, hey, let's kind of get things set up, put the foundation in place, and let's start to be really responsible about bringing great franchisees with the right infrastructure, the right support, making sure they're successful, and then scale that up over time. And that model, worked really well for the company and our franchisees. So I was 13 years old when I started working at our manufacturing plant. My father offered me the opportunity. I always was looking to make a little, side money, and he said, why don't you work at our manufacturing plant? So I would unload trucks. I would work in the parts department. I ended up building some of our equipment, which was really cool. It was really fun to try to weld and ultimately hone some skills there. And just loved the equipment, loved building something that was really unique. And then when I graduated from undergrad, the then marketing director reached out. He gave me a call. I had a English major, I had a couple minors, and he needed someone to write some marketing materials and offered me the job. And I took the entry level position as a marketing assistant right out of school.
Wow. And so walk me through a bit that growth. When you joined, about how many territories did you have?
To be honest, I don't even know where we were at the time.
How many
Probably
franchisees? How many people were
probably
part of this family?
350 or so
Okay.
territories, something like that. Today Lawn Doctor has over 650 across the platform. We have about 900 or so, and growing pretty rapidly.
And when was the time? Well, I guess prefacing, I come across a lot of franchise founders or even, owners that acquire the franchise brand and bring it to the next level. And they kind of hit a ceiling where they're looking for more smart money to take them to the next level with capital as well as expertise. How did you decide about, basically taking in another investor to bring it up to the next level, and then also growing the family of brands like we've had on the show,
I think in
Chris
terms of
and Andy.
I think in terms of taking on capital, my father wanted to exit the business. Again, 35 years, accomplished everything he wanted. He was treasurer of the International Franchise Association. He was chairman of the IFA. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame. The turnaround with the company, he'd done a lot of really amazing things, and obviously very proud of him, and really an amazing experience working alongside of him and learning from him. So he was ready to exit the business, and of course, private equity provided the liquidity in that transaction. I think also, quite frankly, when you move through a business for so many years and you get it to a certain point, you don't want to go all in again, right? You don't want to take all that risk again that you took in the very beginning, moving your family, starting all over again. So I think the idea of sort of starting all over with reinvestment and doing what was necessary to kind of take the brand to the next level, that was for the next person, right? And so it was kind of a perfect opportunity for him to exit, know that the company was in good hands. The franchisees were really well taken care of. The employees were in a great place. And then we could kind of take this capital, infuse it into the business, and take it to the next level.
And why not just continue to grow the franchise brand instead of going out and acquiring some other home service concepts?
So I think it was interesting. It kind of happened somewhat organically. Started helping some small brands. Just, I love the entrepreneurial spirit. I love the franchisor who started at their kitchen table, started a brand and wanted to build something. And they get to 10, 15, 20 units, and it's hard, right? That early stage in particular to build out a franchise brand is really hard. And so people started to ask me questions. I would help them. I would spend more and more time in that space. And what I realized is a lot of the things that they needed, we had done, right? And we had built some proficiency around that. And so I started to think about that. I looked at the sort of macro demographic trends of baby boomers, millennials, buying home services, and really understanding that consumer is going to buy a lot of home services. Why would we not leverage that infrastructure, bring in the entrepreneur, have them grow, have the platform grow, customers win, everybody wins in the process. So that was some of the impetus of, continuing to grow Lawn Doctor while bringing in some of the smaller brands.
One thing I've noticed with the Happinest executives, as well as numerous franchisees that have spoken across different brands, is just the culture and people helping each other out, pretty positive mindset. What do you think also differentiates Happinest Brands from some of these other home services platform businesses? Because I think it's kind of confusing whether you're a franchise buyer or a franchise broker to distinguish between these different platforms.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to the core of unit economics and franchise relationships, right? So you have to make sure that your franchisees are making money, and they have to know that you care about their success. And you and I were talking a little bit before we started about, we're a franchisor that's going to grow really consistently our unit base every single year, right? But we're not going to be this company that grows at a tremendous rate overnight. That's good for everyone. Right? It's good for the company to absorb that growth, build out the right infrastructure, have franchisees tap into that infrastructure. And I think, looking at it that way, maybe versus some others that are doing it a little bit different and that works for them, that's unique. I think our culture, you've met several of our executives now, and we just really love what we're doing. We love working together and just building what we believe will be the best home service platform in the world over time, and doing it the right way. And so I think you recruit the right leaders recruit the right mid-level managers, and so on. And then you ultimately bring in the right franchisees into that right system that I mentioned. I think that's a really important point of differentiation for us.
And when you see, unit level economics, making money, what are some good benchmarks to have, for someone that's leaving their corporate job? Oftentimes you're taking a big step back to take a big step forward, but that step forward might be 3-4 years. What's something, how do you, talk to those people that are going into entrepreneurship and really set expectations? Like, hey, the first 6 months are going to be really hard. The first year is probably going to be really hard. And yeah, how do you have that conversation?
It's very insightful. Great question that very few people ask. So I think it's, do the work today that most people aren't willing to do so you can live the life that most people can't tomorrow. Right. And we really lean into that. You can't be someone different before someone signs the franchise agreement than you are after. Right. This is a long-term relationship. We have 10-year agreements. Many of our franchisees have been with us 20, 30 even 40 years, right? And so
Now it's next
we,
generation, right?
yeah, exactly. We've got second generation operators. That's a major theme in our business. So we lean into that, and we're very honest about the fact that there's some real advantages to particularly home service franchising, low investment, van based. You don't have to have a physical location, you don't have a critical, build out, and there's just a lot of things that are really nice about it. But you also have to grow from no customers to several hundred and then several thousand customers if that's the scale that you want to have. And so we talk about that process, and we're very transparent about that first 6 months, that first year. And then the dynamics get very attractive over time because you don't have a significant fixed cost base. You can scale with the customer base you have. You have a bigger customer base who can refer other customers at a low cost, and you can add additional services to the underlying transaction. So that's really attractive to people. And I think people gravitate to truth. They gravitate to authenticity, right? And so if you're honest about who you are, what you are, the right people will join, and the people who aren't a good fit won't, and that's okay. That's the way it should be.
And I saw in your item 19, it's pretty transparent where you list, franchisees making, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like 8 million, $9 million running a lawn care business. And then you have other ones that are way below, but they're more starting out closer to 100K. And a lot of franchisors won't break down the average, won't break down the median, and won't share all that data.
Yeah, I mean, I think you put it all out there and people make good decisions. And we walk them through it. Good franchisors are going to walk through the FDD and hit on all the critical aspects and make sure everyone understands what the opportunity is and isn't. And, you touch on the high side and second generation operators. We have $10 million plus franchisees, second generation, where I knew the father who started with nothing, with a single van, drove away from our training class up to Massachusetts, and now the entire family is living a totally different kind of life. That's the American dream for them and for us to be a part of that process.
Yeah, if you can't get out of bed for that, I don't know what else you can.
Exactly. That's right.
And do you help franchisees with like the steps of growing that business? Because a lot of times it's like, going from 0 to 100K, that infrastructure is very different than 100 to 500K to then up to 2 mil. And the profit margin goes up and down as you make those key hires, which for a first time entrepreneur can be really tough to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a stair step, as you could imagine, right? You get to a plateau. Let's say you fill out a unit, a production unit, and then you have to invest in another unit, right? The van, the equipment, et cetera. And then you fill that up. And so your margin at different steps in that stair step process kind of, fluctuates, always getting larger on a dollar basis because you're growing up towards a bigger number. To your initial question, yeah, from day one, we have an onboarding team. We then transition to a ramp team. That ramp team gets you through that first critical period, which looks very different in terms of learning the nuts and bolts of the business, figuring out the technology, understanding the territory, really figuring out how to interact with the customer and recruit your first employees, just all of those pieces, up to actually recently we hired someone in a role we call Director of Operational Excellence for our very largest franchisees who are thinking about buying land, building their own building, exit planning, how to develop key managers, the next level of leadership in their organization, asset allocation, like very different topics here than you would have in a startup, right? And everywhere in between. And so I think as a good franchisor who's been doing this for almost 60 years, you have to support everyone sort of all the way through the life cycle through exit.
I found it interesting over the last few years, especially with home service concepts, like the division of what the franchisor does and what the franchisee does, where back in the day, and for most franchise systems, it's the franchisor is providing the branding, they're providing the know-how, they're providing the training. But more and more, there might be an add-on where they're doing the marketing, they're doing the call center. How do you guys divide and conquer between, the franchise brand, the franchisor, and then supporting that local franchisee?
It's interesting. We've, of course, as you'd imagine, we evolved over time, right? It used to be one thing and now something very different. I would say In the early days, we were completely distributed, right? The franchisees were doing a lot of the activities in the local market. And over time, you see this real healthy split between, centralization and decentralization. So, digital marketing, what we learned, the consumer was moving faster than hundreds of franchisees respectfully could, right? New platforms all the time, data management. It's just really difficult for a franchisee to engage with customers and employees and grow business day to day and be a marketing center of excellence as things move really quickly.
It's not the best use of their time.
Exactly. So that's a value add, right? It's engaging the customer where they are, and it's helping the franchisee grow faster and focus on their core competency. So we move that in, and there's certainly still local marketing efforts that happen in the community, as you would imagine, but most of it happens centrally. Then from that move, what we learned is the velocity of leads and the engagement with the customer changed dramatically. The expectation of the customer was changing. I always call it the Uber, DoorDash, Amazon effect. Like everyone wants everything right now. And so our franchisees couldn't drop everything and meet that customer, like pick up the phone, answer an online inquiry. And so we needed to build a call center. And so, we started that process of growing it, over time after initially building it. And so we just kind of look at, through the whole value chain, where do we add value? Where does the franchisee add the most value? For example, we all the research and development around our equipment, all the building of that equipment, that allows the franchisee every single day, every vehicle, every technician to be much more efficient. So we do the design build. The franchisee, of course, is using it day to day. So we kind of look at the whole value chain. Should it be internalized or external? And I think we found a really nice balance between the two.
And it seems like for some of the brands you work with, like the cleaning brand that has a different brand in Canada and in the US, so you can elaborate on, but that it's kind of first to market to be able to just provide a quote that the customer can just book rather than have an estimate and a back and forth process. And 97% of the time you should be making money. And there's maybe you have a loss built in, but there's no friction anymore in the sales process.
Yeah, exactly. So the OBE, the online booking engine so we have Elite up in Canada and now Sparkle Squad in the US. Chris Donis is running both brands for us, amazing leader. And so what's really cool about the platform with Happinest Brands is the value isn't just pushing down from the parent or, the legacy brand to the emerging brands. We're getting value kind of across the platform, up and down, right? And so that's a great example of they had this technology that really worked to engage the customer. And now we're looking at how can we apply that across the continuum so that a customer wants to buy something through a certain experience, we can deliver it, right? And so really innovative solution. And some customers still want to pick up the phone and talk to you, and we can provide for that too. So it's kind of omni-channel.
And when you say emerging brand, I mean, I think we have a similar definition, but over the last year or two, there's been so many brands that go 0 to 100, where it seems like your definition of emerging brand might be like mosquito hunters, growing at a very fast rate, but with a nice base.
Yeah, I think an emerging brand to me is typically you start with that one location, you cut your teeth on that, you figure out the model, you franchise, and maybe you get to 10 units, maybe you get to 20. But to build what I call an iconic brand, really a national or international brand, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of locations. And you just kind of get to a point where you want to look for more capital, more infrastructure, institutional knowledge. And that's kind of where that partnership comes in, where we wrap our infrastructure, we wrap, across the entire platform. We have over 3,000 years of experience. We kind of take that and leverage that to sort of grow them up faster.
What are some of your most exciting initiatives for 2024 that you're looking to roll out and double down on for your franchisees?
So broadly digital transformation, as you would imagine, kind of looking at the whole suite of technology solutions that we offer, looking at how we manage data, taking our BI, our business intelligence, and our data analytics to another level so that we're getting faster with insights, better decision quality, getting to market with solutions faster. helping push some of that information to franchisees so they can make better decisions inside of their business. I'd say kind of all things digital, and then data as a piece of that is a big part of what we're focused on for the future.
And are you doing a lot of these initiatives in-house or bringing in outside software providers?
So it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody, actually another emerging brand just today on this topic, and they were doing a lot of work in-house, and we've gone through that journey, right? We built our own software initially. We built our franchise information software. We built our first CRM. We are largely outsourced with best of breed technologies. And then you have, APIs that are sort of pulling that data into a central place so that you can, kind of move that information where you need to. In terms of like the resources, you want the best resources who understand that particular functional area, because it's moving so quickly all the time. We are going to bring in an extra resource to kind of lead that charge for us so that they can kind of manage all the pieces. But there's experts in these different areas, and we're not going to be an expert in everything.
Scott, what are some daily or weekly metrics that franchisees should be checking and raising blockers if the numbers aren't trending as they should?
Yeah, so we're going through that process to even sharpen that a little bit more. That of course has evolved over time. I don't think you're ever done learning. You're never done kind of sharpening the saw. And it's interesting. As soon as we got business intelligence in the business, someone told me, you are never going to be done. You're going to build a report, you're going to see something, and then you're going to go down to the next layer and you're going to want to know that. And then that leads you to another place that you want to know. So they were so right about that. We just want to continue to get better. I think at a base level, of course, you want to understand your marketing cost. You want to understand your customer satisfaction. You want to understand your growth rate. You want to understand the variance between your P&L, like what your budget was and what your actuals are. I think the basics of the business are always going to be there. I think it's...
How do you measure customer satisfaction?
So we're looking at some net promoter score type of metrics. I do think that like one of the best indicators is we have 30,000 plus positive Google reviews. So we get a lot of insight from our customers on who's happy, what those customers look like, and the ones who aren't, how we can get better for sure.
Scott, is there anything that we didn't go through today that might be relevant for prospective franchisees?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we kind of touched on who we are at a high level, the Happinest Brands platform, the authenticity, the culture, the focus on technology, marketing, sales. No, I don't think anything particular.
What's the best way for people to get in contact with you and your team to explore one of the brands?
So I think if it's across the platform, happinest.com, and then any of the brands, you can go to those brands distinctly. Lawn Doctor, Mosquito Hunters, EcoMaids, Elite, and Sparkle Squad. Those are all our brands. You can go through those websites and connect with the teams.
Well, Scott, really appreciate you taking the time to connect, and we'll be sure to include a link in case anyone's interested in exploring further Happinest Brands.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much.
Take care.